July 20th, 1973. Hong Kong, 11:30 p.m. The phone rang in a house in Los Angeles at 7:30 in the morning. Linda Lee was in the kitchen. Bruce had been in Hong Kong for 3 weeks, finishing post-production on Enter the Dragon. He was supposed to come home in 4 days. Linda had already started thinking about what she would cook for his first night back. He always wanted the same thing when he came home from a long trip. Simple food. Something that tasted like the house. She picked up the phone. It was Robert, Bruce's brother. His voice was wrong from the first word. Linda knew before he said anything. The way you know when something is broken that cannot be fixed. Bruce Lee was gone. He was 32 years old. The official cause of death would be listed as cerebral edema, a swelling of the brain caused by a reaction to a painkiller he had taken for a headache. It was so rare, so sudden, so completely without warning that for years afterward people would refuse to believe it. Conspiracy theories would rise and multiply like weeds. Assassination, poison, a curse on the Lee family. People needed a story that made sense because the truth was too simple and too devastating. The most physically perfect human being anyone had ever seen had been killed by a headache pill. Linda sat down on the kitchen floor. She stayed there for a long time. In the days that followed, the world came apart in slow motion. Fans collapsed in the streets of Hong Kong. Grown men wept openly outside the Golden Harvest film studio. Letters arrived by the thousands at the Lee family home. From martial artists, from students, from people who had never met Bruce Lee but felt with absolute certainty that they had lost something irreplaceable. The funeral was held on July 25th, 1973, in Hong Kong. Then a second service in Seattle, where Bruce was buried. Steve McQueen was a pallbearer. James Coburn was a pallbearer. The two men carried their friend's coffin with the careful, deliberate movements of people trying to make a moment last, because they knew that when it ended, something would be over that would never come back. Johnny Carson sat in the back of the crowd in Seattle, wearing sunglasses, trying to be invisible. He would later say that standing at that graveside was the moment he truly understood what Bruce had been trying to teach him. That being present, really present with the people in your life, was not a luxury. It was the whole point. Linda Lee stood at the front. She was 29 years old. She had 2 children. Brandon was 8. Shannon was 4. She stood straight and still and did not look away from the coffin. She had made a decision, somewhere in those 5 days between the phone call and the burial, that she would not collapse. Not because she wasn't devastated, but because Brandon and Shannon were watching her. And she was going to show them how to carry something unbearable without being destroyed by it. What nobody at that funeral knew, what nobody in the world knew, was that 3 days before he died, Bruce Lee had written a letter. He had written it alone, late at night in his hotel room in Hong Kong. He had sealed it in an envelope. He had written Linda's name on the front. And beneath her name he had written 4 words that would not be fully understood until years later. Do not open yet. Linda found the letter 3 weeks after the funeral, going through the last of Bruce's things that had been shipped back from Hong Kong. It was at the bottom of a leather bag, wrapped in a cloth, as if he had placed it there deliberately, carefully, like something that needed protecting. She held it for a long time without opening it. She sat at the kitchen table with the letter in both hands and thought about those 4 words. Do not open yet. Bruce had always been precise with language. He never said anything he didn't mean. If he had written, do not open yet, he had a reason. She put the letter in the drawer of her nightstand. She did not open it. Coming up. What was in that letter? Why Bruce Lee wrote it 3 days before he died? The one person he addressed it to besides Linda. And why, when it was finally read aloud for the first time 10 years later, every person in the room had to leave and be alone for a while. But before we get into what that letter contained, I see messages all the time in the comment section that some of you didn't realize you hadn't subscribed. So if you could do me a favor and double check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's simple, it's free, and it's something that anybody who watches this show can do to help us keep everything going. You are part of this journey, and I appreciate you more than you know. Now, let's go back to July 17th, 1973. 3 days before Bruce Lee died. It was a Tuesday. Bruce had been in Hong Kong for 3 weeks, working long days on the final sound mixing for Enter the Dragon. The film was going to be released in August. Everyone who had seen early cuts knew it was something extraordinary. The studio executives were already talking about it in terms usually reserved for events, not movies. Bruce knew it too. He had poured everything he had into that film. Every philosophy, every physical capability, every idea he had spent 32 years accumulating about what a human being could be. But on the evening of July 17th, something shifted. Bruce had dinner with the film's producer, Raymond Chow, and an actress named Betty Ting Pei. The dinner was unremarkable. They talked about the film, about promotional plans, about Bruce's next project. Bruce was in good spirits, animated, the way he always was when he was talking about something he cared about. Afterward, Bruce said he had a headache. Betty offered him a painkiller. He took it and lay down to rest. What happened next has been examined and re-examined for 50 years. The medical explanation is precise and terrible. Bruce had an abnormal sensitivity to the analgesic compound in that painkiller. His brain began to swell. He never woke up. But what nobody has ever fully explained is what Bruce did in the hours before that dinner. He went back to his hotel room in the afternoon. He ordered tea. He sat at the small desk by the window. And he wrote for approximately 2 hours. The hotel staff remembered seeing the Do Not Disturb sign on his door. A housekeeper passing in the hallway heard what she later described as the sound of paper turning, the scratch of a pen. Silence. More writing. When Bruce left for dinner that evening, he left the letter on the desk. He then apparently thought better of it, went back and put it in his leather bag, folded it, wrapped it in the cloth, placed it at the bottom, as if he knew. Nobody who knew Bruce Lee would say he had a premonition of death. He was not superstitious. He was, in many ways, the least mystical person imaginable, despite the philosophical depth of his thinking. He believed in observable reality, in what the body could do, in what the mind could prove through action. But people who study the lives of those who die suddenly, unexpectedly, at the height of their powers, often note something: a letter written, a phone call made, a conversation that felt, in retrospect, like a goodbye that the person themselves didn't know they were giving. 3 days before he died, Bruce Lee wrote a letter, and he told his wife not to open it yet. Linda Lee kept that letter in her nightstand drawer for 10 years. She moved through those years with a determination that people who knew her describe as something beyond ordinary strength. She raised Brandon and Shannon. She wrote a book about Bruce. She oversaw his legacy with fierce protectiveness. She made sure his philosophy, his teaching, his way of seeing the world survived his absence. She dated the letter in her mind as she went. Certain years felt wrong. The children were too young. The grief was too raw. The world was not ready, or she was not ready, or both. She would open the drawer sometimes and look at the envelope and put it back. She thought about the 4 words often. Do not open yet. It was such a Bruce thing to write. Precise, trusting. He had written it knowing she would honor it. He had written it knowing she would wait until she understood why she had waited. In 1983, 10 years after Bruce's death, Linda was preparing a retrospective event in Bruce's honor. Brandon was 18. Shannon was 14. Brandon had grown into a young man who carried his father's physical grace and something else, something quieter, a thoughtfulness that made people feel, when they were talking to him, that he was genuinely interested in what they had to say. Linda decided it was time. She sat at the kitchen table. Brandon and Shannon were both home. She told them she had something to read to them. She told them it was from their father. She told them he had written it shortly before he died and asked her to wait before opening it. Brandon was very still. Shannon reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Linda opened the envelope. The letter was 4 pages, written in Bruce's handwriting, which was precise and slightly forward-leaning, the handwriting of a man who was always moving towards something. She read it aloud. The letter began not with Linda's name, but with a salutation that nobody in that room was expecting. It began, "To whoever is reading this when the time is right." Bruce had written it not just for Linda. He had written it for Brandon and Shannon, whom he addressed directly, knowing they would be older when they read it, knowing he would not be there to say these things in person. He had written it for the students he had taught, for the people who had watched him on screen, for anyone, anywhere, who might need to hear what he had to say. He wrote about fear first. He wrote that the thing he had spent his entire life appearing to conquer was the thing he had actually spent his entire life learning to carry. He was afraid, he wrote, every single day, afraid of failing, afraid of not becoming what he could see himself becoming, afraid that the gap between his vision and his ability would never fully close. He wrote that this fear was not a weakness. He wrote that it was the engine, that without it, there was no fuel, that the people who claimed to feel no fear were not brave, they were numb. And numbness, he wrote, is the one thing I have always been most afraid of becoming. He wrote about his father, Li Hoi Chuen, a Cantonese opera singer who had carried Bruce as an infant actor in his films. He wrote about growing up between worlds, between Hong Kong and America, never fully belonging to either, always slightly outside, always watching from a position that was neither here nor there. He wrote that this outsideness, which had caused him so much pain as a young man, had turned out to be the greatest gift he had ever been given. Because a person who belongs completely to one world stops being able to see it, and seeing clearly, he wrote, is everything. He wrote about Linda. He did not write about her the way famous men often write about their wives in letters, with grand declarations and sweeping romantic language. He wrote about specific things, the way she made tea, the sound of her moving through the house in the morning before he was fully awake, the particular quality of her attention when he was talking about something that mattered to him. He wrote, "You have always listened as if what I was saying was worth listening to. You cannot know what that has meant. A person who listens that way changes what you are able to say. You made me more honest simply by paying attention." He wrote about Brandon. Brandon was 8 years old when his father wrote about him, and Bruce wrote to the man Brandon would become, not the child he was. He wrote, "You will be tested in ways I cannot predict. People will want things from you that have nothing to do with who you are. They will see my name and project onto you a story that is not your story. Your only job is to remain yourself inside that pressure. This is harder than any physical training I could have given you. But I have watched you since the day you were born, and I know you can do it. You have something I did not have at your age. You are comfortable being still. Learn to trust that stillness. It knows more than the noise." He wrote about Shannon. Shannon was 4 when Bruce died, too young to have clear memories of him. He knew this when he wrote to her. He wrote, "You will have to build me from the stories other people tell." This is an imperfect way to know someone. So let me tell you one thing directly, from me to you, with no intermediary. You were the last great surprise of my life. The moment you were born, something rearranged itself inside me that I did not know needed rearranging. I do not have the right words for what you gave me. I just want you to know that you gave it. Then Bruce wrote about dying. Not his own death specifically, because he did not know he was dying. He wrote about mortality in the abstract, the way a philosopher writes about it, the way a man writes about it when he is 32 and feels completely alive and is simply being honest about the fact that life ends. He wrote, "I have spent a great deal of time trying to become something, to master things, to push past limits, and I do not regret any of it. But I want whoever reads this to know that the moments that have mattered most to me were not the moments of achievement. They were the moments of connection, sitting with a student who finally understood something they had been struggling with, watching Brandon sleep, the particular silence that exists in a room when everyone in it trusts each other completely." He wrote, "Be useful, not famous, not impressive, useful to the people in front of you. Give them your full attention. Make them feel that what they are saying matters. This is not a small thing. This is, I have come to believe, the whole thing." The last paragraph of the letter was addressed to no one in particular, or to everyone. It was short, 4 sentences. He wrote, "I do not know when this will be read. I do not know who will be in the room. I hope you are with people you love. I hope you tell them so." Linda finished reading. She set the pages down on the table. Brandon had not moved throughout the entire reading. His hands were flat on the table. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. He was doing what his father had written about. He was being still. Shannon had her face in her hands. Linda looked at her children. She thought about the 4 words on the envelope, "Do not open yet." She understood now why he had written them. Not because the letter required time to be written properly. It was complete the moment he sealed it. He had written those words because he knew that some things can only be received when the person receiving them has grown into the shape required to hold them. Brandon was 18, old enough to understand what his father had written about fear and stillness and remaining yourself under pressure. Shannon was 14, old enough to understand what it meant to be told directly that you were someone's last great surprise. The time had been right. Bruce had known it would be. In the weeks that followed the reading, Brandon did something quietly extraordinary. He transcribed the letter by hand, not to copy it, but to understand it, the way musicians transcribe songs they love, to feel the structure from the inside. He wrote every word in his own handwriting. Then he put it away. He never showed that transcription to anyone. But people who were close to Brandon in the years that followed said he seemed different after that spring, more settled, less pulled in different directions, as if he had found something to navigate by. Shannon kept the original letter. She has never spoken publicly about what it meant to her in detail. She has said only, in one interview many years later, that reading her father's words to her, words he had written when she was 4 years old, was the closest she ever came to actually knowing him. She said, "He wrote to me like I was already the person I was going to become." That is a remarkable thing to do for someone, to see them before they can see themselves. In 1993, 20 years after Bruce's death, Brandon Lee was killed on the set of The Crow. He was 28 years old, a prop gun malfunction. Another death so sudden, so improbable, so completely without warning, that people once again reached for explanations that made more sense than the truth. Linda Lee, who had already lost her husband, lost her son. She stood at another funeral. She carried another unbearable thing. What people who knew Linda said about that time was that she did not collapse, that she was devastated, completely and visibly devastated, but that she stood straight and did not look away, the way she had stood at Bruce's funeral 20 years before. The way she had shown Brandon and Shannon how to carry something unbearable without being destroyed by it. Brandon had been given his father's letter 10 years before he died. He had had 10 years with those words, 10 years knowing that his father had seen him, had written to the man he would become, had told him that the stillness in him was something to trust. People who knew Brandon said he carried that knowledge visibly, that there was a quality to his presence in his last years, a groundedness, a lack of need to perform or prove that was unusual in someone his age in that industry. He knew who he was. His father had told him. The letter Bruce Lee wrote 3 days before he died has never been published in full. Linda Lee has kept it private, shared only with the people Bruce intended it for. What is known about its contents comes from those who were in the room when it was read, and from Shannon and Linda themselves, in occasional fragments offered in interviews over the decades. But the existence of the letter and what it represented spread through the martial arts world, the film world, the world of people who had loved Bruce Lee from a distance, like something that needed to be known even if it couldn't be fully seen. A man at the height of his powers, 3 days before his death, sat down and wrote to the people he loved about fear and stillness and paying attention and being useful, about the moments that mattered, about telling people you love them while you are in the room with them. He told them not to open it yet because he trusted them to know when yet had arrived. And they did. In 1993, after Brandon died, Linda opened the drawer where she kept the letter. She read it again alone. She thought about the line Bruce had written about Brandon. "You are comfortable being still. Learn to trust that stillness. It knows more than the noise." She thought about the last 4 sentences. "I do not know when this will be read. I do not know who will be in the room. I hope you are with people you love. I hope you tell them so." She folded the letter carefully. She put it back in the envelope. She went and found Shannon. She didn't say anything about the letter. She just found her daughter and sat with her. The way people sit together when words are not the right tool, when presence is the whole thing, which is exactly what Bruce had written about. Being in the room, paying attention, giving the people in front of you your full presence, not the performance of attention, not the courtesy of attention, the real thing. The kind that says, you are worth stopping for, you are worth being here for. That is what Bruce Lee wrote about 3 days before he died. That is what he spent his whole life trying to become. That is what he left behind when he went. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the people we love need to hear it now, not later, not when the time is right, now, share it. Share it with someone who needs to be told they are seen. Share it with someone who is waiting to say something important and hasn't said it yet. And subscribe to this channel for more untold stories about the moments when legends stopped performing and started being human. Because somewhere right now, there is a letter that needs writing. There is a person who needs to know they are someone's last great surprise. There is a drawer that has been closed long enough. Open it. Tell them. That's what Bruce Lee would have wanted. That's what he wrote, alone in a hotel room in Hong Kong, 3 days before the world lost him. That's what still matters today.